Debt-Free TV, in association with getoutofdebtfree.org.
Hello, this is Peter Croll, another very wise man, and he'll be talking about council tax and why they're in serious trouble with it. Not us, because we should be paying it, but them.
Right?
Is it? Oh, it is now. You turn it on. This one was turned on. Hello? Feedback. Hello everybody.
Alright, Pete, what's happening, man?
Yeah, I decided.
If you go to that side, you'll be okay.
This one? Yeah, is that okay?
You're right here, Peter.
It's pretty noisy, this one. Yeah, I wanted to speak about council tax in a specific way.
Can't hear properly.
Can you?
Hold the mic back there.
Hold the
mic here. That's better.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Well, I first started challenging council tax about 5 years ago, and I challenged them simply on the basis that I didn't have a contract with them. And I've never budged from that, but we don't talk about that anymore. That was the first flush of paperwork with notices that I sent them over a period of time. And they've put a charge on my house twice, and this year, for some reason, they've decided that they're not going to put another charge on, but they're going to actually try and put me in prison, which was what they originally threatened me with, but never went through with it. Because I think the sanctions committee in the council must have realised that I actually have a house without a mortgage. I'm not rich, but I've just got a tiny little house that's paid for. So it just so happened that almost immediately I got the letter that said that they were going to send me a summons for non-payment and try and get me committed to prison for non-payment. I was switched on to a High Court judgment by Rob B that didn't manage to be here today, and it was the judgment that some of the people here do already know about, which was the Reverend Paul Nicholson, which was a judgment handed down in May last year in the High Court, and it resulted from. I'll just very briefly run through the process because I think it's something that everybody really ought to know about, and everybody needs to understand that there are these processes in place. The Reverend Nicholson brought an application against the magistrates, which I believe was Highbury Corner, on the basis that he was aggrieved by the fact that the magistrates had failed to make the council comply with section 34(7) of the Administration and Enforcement Regulations 1992, because they hadn't asked the council to say whether they'd reasonably incurred the costs that they asked the magistrates to award them. I don't know why it's feeding back. It never did it with anybody else. Maybe it's my voice.
The conspiracy.
Yeah. Hello? Is that better? Yes. So if you, I just want to make it very, very simple, because I think it's important that we read statutes, we read regulations, and we understand what they actually mean. In the Council Tax Enforcement and Administration Regulations 1992, the council is allowed to take you to court, to the magistrates' court, to get the magistrates to award a liability order, and the council is allowed to apply for costs that are reasonably incurred. And Regulation 34(7) uses the words reasonably incurred. And I know that lots and lots of activists, people that think like us and that realise what's going on, have been arguing for years that the council are using it as an unlawful cash flow mechanism, whereby if they have several thousand people each month or 3 months or whatever it is that they have a whole bunch of liability orders happening in the court, that the council applies to the magistrates to grant liability orders, and then they say, and oh, by the way, we also want to apply for costs. And in the Reverend Nicholson's case, I think it was £135 for each liability order. And the Reverend Nicholson calculated that it meant that the magistrates awarded the council something like £2.5 million of costs for that day's hearings, which would normally take about 10 minutes because they hear them in bulk and they sign off the costs in bulk as well. And when myself and Guy and a whole bunch of other people went into the Welsh Pool magistrates in my council tax hearing, we sat and watched them do it. So the solicitor of the council said to the magistrates, will you please award these liability orders to us? And the magistrate said yes. And he said, and also we want to get £50 costs for each one because that's what they charge where I live. And the magistrate said yes. And we watched them sign it off and write on the paper plus £50 costs. And I've actually got a copy of that piece of paper that the lady magistrate signed on the day. So we know they do it. We know that in Glasgow there's about 6,000 of them each time. That's several £million. The Reverend Nicholson identified £2.5 million in the Highbury Court for the day that he was there. And so this is, we see it as a financial scam that they've been getting away with for years. And what reasonably incurred means, in Regulation 34(7), means that the magistrates are supposed to hold the council to account to show that they have reasonably incurred those costs in issuing the applications for the liability orders. And the judge actually decided in the Reverend Nicholson's case, because the magistrates hadn't asked the magistrates to show that they'd reasonably incurred the costs. I know it's a bit tedious to go through, but it's important to understand that that is the law that they're trying to get us on, and the magistrates hadn't held them to strict proof of what their costs were. And we know from loads of hearings that we've been in the civil courts and in the criminal courts, that you have to fight the judges like crazy to get award any costs at all. But here the magistrates are licking the backsides of the council in awarding them costs that they haven't even justified. Now, what happened was that in the Reverend Nicholson's case, he took out an application under section 111 of the Magistrates Courts Act 1980, which requires the magistrates to state a case to the High Court saying why they've done whatever it is you're aggrieved by. And in his case, he was aggrieved by the fact that they hadn't made the council justify the costs. The magistrates refused to state a case to the High Court, as they always do, and so then that opens the door to the complainant applying for judicial review, and that's what the Reverend Nicholson did. So after however long it took, he got a judicial review into the High Court, and Mrs. Justice Andrews in May of last year, about a year ago, awarded him the judgment. And her judgment was that the magistrates were at fault for allowing the council to be awarded costs and awarding them costs without making them justify them under Regulation 34(7). And basically, that judgment, it's about 13 pages, and I thoroughly recommend everybody to read it more than once, because it contains not just that detail, but various other details which expose all sorts of wrongdoing that all authorities are doing to us all of the time. It's not just councils and it's not just magistrates.
Does that ruling then not make that you should have a full investigation into all of it?
Well, I'm going to come to that, because I've used it against my council since I got that judgment. I only got it about 2 months ago, and I've actually put in an application to them already. Now, Mrs. Justice Andrews was very, very strong about many details of what's actually going on. One of the things she identified is something that we've always believed, is that council tax hearings are neither subject to the criminal procedure rules or the civil procedure rules. That meant that her ruling said that the awarding of costs hasn't got anything to do with any rules. All it's got to do with is the council tax enforcement regulations. And that was why that was the only thing that she could rely on, is that the regulations say that the magistrates have to make sure that it's reasonably incurred. She also brought attention to the fact that she acknowledged that the Reverend Nicholson's claim that the council had got $2.5 million in this bunch of hearings was a perfectly reasonable thing to have arrived at anyway. She agreed with that. But she also brought attention to the fact that the council and the magistrates' courts have had email exchanges between them, agreeing all this stuff beforehand, and that exposes something that I was just talking to this lady here earlier on about the fact that they've got all these agreements going on all over the place, and it's now starting to become obvious through various other channels that there are strategic partnerships, which is what they call them, established between virtually every public body and every judicial body all over the place, and our whole administration appears to be running not according to the rule of law, but according to the strategic partnerships that exist between the police and the councils and the courts and whoever else it might be, DVLA probably. And the reason why it's come up is that I recently had an email about speeding tickets, and apparently there are strategic partnerships between the speed camera groups all over the country and various bunches of councils, and there are strategic partnerships set up between them and the police and the courts, and it's something that they don't actually want to have exposed. So Mrs. Justice Andrews did us a real favour by even hinting at the fact that the council had had email contacts between themselves and the court.
Sounds like joint enterprise to me.
Yes, that's right. And it also goes under the name of Memorandum of Understanding as well, which exists in lots and lots of instances, specifically between the Law Society and the Solicitors Regulation Authority and all of the other organisations. And so the Reverend Nicholson won his case, and Mrs. Justice Andrews said in her judgment that she had heard that since he had brought this challenge to the council had actually withdrawn their demand for costs. And so she said she didn't need to worry about that, but she said if they hadn't, she would have quashed it anyway because it was unlawful. You really need, it's a terrific judgment to read. It's an instance where a High Court judge really did the right thing. But what she stopped short at is right at the very end. She said that she quashed the order for costs against the council, but she didn't actually quash the liability order itself. Because there's another detail that I'm going to refer to when I speak about the second judgment. Because in December of last year, a guy called Terence Ewing, who is apparently a really well-known activist and is known to the courts all over the place, and was made a vexatious litigant in, I think, the late 90s. So he's been around a long time, beavering away at all this stuff. He got the same judgment against his council, which I believe was Camden. I think it was Haringey, but it was heard in the Camden Magistrates. And the High Court judge in that judicial review, I believe it was, she drew heavily on Mrs. Justice Andrews' judgment, and so whereas Mrs. Justice Andrews' one was about 13 pages, this one was only 3. And she quoted the Nicholson judgment all the way through, but at the very end what she said is that Regulation 34(7) says that the magistrates should award a liability order which is which is an aggregate of the debt plus the costs. And so what Mrs. Justice McGowan in the Ewing judgment said in December was that because the costs had fallen, as per the Nicholson case, therefore because the liability order was based on the aggregate between those two amounts, then the liability should fall, the liability order falls as well. So Mrs. Justice McGowan quashed, for Terence Ewing, quashed not only the costs order, but the liability order as well. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that this is really significant. Because basically what these two judges are saying, in effect, is that all over the country, the councils are making huge demands for money, for costs that nobody can afford anyway. I mean, in London it looks as though it's about £135. In my county it's 50, and in Wales they have a cap of 70, so that's the most they can charge anyway. And so basically this money-making scam, which is millions and millions a year all over the country, has actually been completely exposed by these two judgments. And one of the reasons why I'm talking about it is that I want everybody to know that these judgments exist.
Thank you.
Because what I've done is as soon as I got this judgment, which was a few days after I received this threat to stick me in prison, I decided to use this as a challenge against my counsel. So I sent them a cease and desist notice, telling them to leave me alone on the basis of the fact that these two High Court judges had in effect told them that they're acting illegally, because I sat and watched their magistrates do exactly the same thing to me, and that happened twice, because I've been in court twice over it. So I sent them this cease and desist notice, which was laid out like a letter. It's got my address at the top and then their address underneath, and then dear Mr. whatever, and I sent a copy to the CEO, to the Chief Finance Officer, the Section 151 officer, to the corporate solicitor, and to the finance guy who'd sent me the original threatening letter. And I got a letter back from the council solicitor, which was complete and utter garbage. It was only about that long, and it completely misinterpreted what these two High Court judges have been saying about the aggregation of the costs and the debt and da 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 da. It was complete nonsense. And when I looked at the dates, I realised that he'd written me that reply less than 24 hours after I sent the letter to him. So he couldn't possibly have read 16 pages of judgments. And because I need to read them 2 or 3 times to really understand what they're saying, understand them enough to be able to write them a challenge based on it, which I did. So a significant detail of that letter that he sent me was that my letter notice was entitled Cease and Desist Notice, and I referred to the fact that it was a notice lower down. He wrote me back this letter saying, cease and desist letter. I am in receipt of your letter of da 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 da. Now, they do this all the time. Loads and loads of people have told me, and I've seen it written all over the internet, that whenever you send them a notice, they send you back a letter saying thank you for your letter. So I went online and did a whole load of research on what a notice is. And a notice is a pretty serious document, because what it actually means is that you are putting them on notice that this information is in existence, and they are required to diligently research what it is you've told them in order that they can act appropriately in the light of that information. And Mrs. Justice Andrews said so in her judgment as well, which I put in the next thing that I sent to them. And what she said in her judgment for the Reverend Nicholson was that it is a well-known aspect of public law that when a local authority is taking an action, they need to be in full possession of all of the information so that they can act properly. She told them that, and I'd sent them that judgment. So they knew that the notice that I sent them was putting them on notice that such and such a thing exists. So what I did was I wrote them a notice, and it was like notice across the top, and I laid everything out. It was, I think, 2 pages, but not as big as it could have been. And so I wrote this notice laying out exactly what a notice is, why it's important to them, why these judgments apply to them, and mostly because I sat and watched the magistrates act for them in exactly the same way that these 2 judges had ruled against. And then I added an appendix which had all the definitions of what a notice is. And I accompany it with a letter to the CEO. I sent a copy of the notice and the appendix to the legal officer, and I sent the CEO a copy with a letter telling him that I hadn't copied his legal officer in because the legal officer had been either incompetent or willfully avoiding the issue. And I said, will you please speak to him and explain to him why this stuff is important, why High Court judges need to be taken notice of, why it is case law, and why you have to take notice of it because your magistrates are doing the same. I've sat there and watched them, and I have evidence to show you that they actually did it. And I used the magistrate's name because it's written there on the thing that she signed. And that was over 2 weeks ago now, and I haven't heard a peep out of them. So I really don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if they're going to take any notice or whether they're going to steamroller ahead or anything. But I mean, I've tried all sorts of interventions with these people. I've tried virtually everything that everybody's tried, and nothing makes a dent in them. But I've got a feeling that this one might. And it would be great if loads and loads of other people started doing it as well. I mean, those judgments are really, really worth reading. And if anybody's interested, I'll get the titles of them. You can look them up online. If you go to the Bailey website, they're all these judgments are there. But you'll need to have the you'll need to have, what do they call them? There's some kind of citation number. Yes, you need to have those because they're quite hard to find. I don't find Bailey an easy website to navigate around. So if you've got some identity.
Have you got a website where you put links?
No, I'm not really online. I use emails, but I'm not a public onliner myself. So
if you email me them, I'll put them on the video.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, they really are worth a read.
Can you give the names of the cases that we're relying on?
Yes, it was the Reverend Paul Nicholson, and that judgment was handed down last May, and the second one was Terence Ewing. And that was handed down last December. I think it was the 23rd. But I think one of the reasons.
So could you just give the Bailey website spellings, please?
It's BAILLII.
Yeah.
Is it?
.org.
Yes, .org. Yeah. I think that's what it is, more or less. British and Irish.
That's correct.
Yeah. Now I just want to finish up because that's about all that I have to say about this. But one of the things that I want to mention is that these 2 High Court judgments, those 2 lady judges did the right thing for us. And it's very interesting to notice that sometimes judges are absolutely impeccable. I mean, if you read through Mrs. Justice Andrews' judgment, she nitpicked. And she nitpicked and nitpicked and nitpicked to show that the council and the magistrates were acting unlawfully. And she did exactly the right thing. The only criticism I would have is that she didn't quash the liability order as well. But the second judge did. So I don't think so. No, I think the Reverend Nicholson didn't ask her to, but it may have been that the other one did. And so I think really we shouldn't despair that the legal system is always going to do us down, but most of the times they do, but not every time. And sometimes they absolutely do the right thing, and my opinion is that on these occasions they did. So that's basically it.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier on that the council have put a couple of charges on your property.
Yeah.
Have you fought that, and are you bothered, and are you going to remedy that? That's my first question. The second question is, are you aware of councils where there's arrears, they stop salary at source to claim those monies back? Are they still doing that? 'Cause I know that the scumbags used to do that many years ago.
Yeah, I believe they do that attachment of earnings and everything.
But only if you respond and reply to that.
Well, I don't have to do that because I'm actually a pensioner.
Right.
So I don't think they can attach pensions, but they can attach benefits and they can attach wages.
Yeah.
But pensions appear to be in a different category.
I see.
I don't know. But the first question, which was about the charge on my house, I didn't challenge the first one. I mean, I could talk a bit about the process whereby they do that, because that is complete fraud.
Yeah.
I mean, a blatant fraud, but that's more detail, so perhaps I won't go into that. But the second time, yes, I did challenge them, and in fact I did go to the county court to challenge them on that one, but that was getting on for a year ago now, well, about 6 months, 9 months ago, and I challenged that on the basis of the whole CAFA scam, and in fact I sent them a whole bunch of notices about that. CAFA is the, in America they call it that, is it Comprehensive Annual Financial Report? And in Britain they call it the Annual Financial Statement or something. Every council publishes it online. It's about 170 pages, and that's what John was referring to in his talk. When the councils, and I live in the same county as John, so the council's council tax receipts are about 63 million a year, and their unusable reserves are 300 million, whatever.
And that doesn't include business rates either.
No.
Business rates is massive.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It's like 20 grand for a small shop.
Yeah, that's right. So basically the annual financial statement identifies it identifies all of the outgoings and receipts, etc., and the assets of the council. But what they don't do is that they don't tell you what the unusable reserves are. And if you go online and watch some of the talks from America about the CAFA scam, CAFR, what you'll start to understand is that the councils have historically been using council tax receipts to fund businesses by which they benefit, and apparently the profit margins on them are absolutely huge, and they could afford to run the whole country and pay us a rebate every year instead of charging us tax, but they don't do it. And I think it's part of it's a part of a system where they're constantly investing in and funding new businesses, and very often it's businesses that operate within their system, like refuse collection, like the agency that will try and force you to get your borehole water tested and then try and charge you a penalty if you refuse to do it, and the agency that chases you if you take your kid out of school without permission. But we know what happened with that last week in the High Court, so they're on the run about that. But all of these agencies that are making money out of us by running these things, I believe, are secretly funded by council tax money, and council tax money being transferred into private business money. I don't understand enough about it, but I'm pretty sure it's going on. So, and that's the scam that John was referring to. So I actually think that that's part of your answer, really. Yeah.
I have a friend here. She had a house taken away from her because she had people living in the house that didn't pay the council tax for years, and the council came after her because they didn't pay, and they'd taken the house away. We was outside trying to prevent it. I mean, this is fraud. You know, it is fraud. It is fraud.
Yeah.
And Nicky's trying to fight it, obviously.
Well, if you could use these judgments I've just been talking about to retrospectively hold them to account and take out a claim against them and get it back, then maybe you can. I don't know.
Go for it. Go for it.
Property, it will be a case. How recent was it? It was just over a year ago. Oh, then you can just go for damages because they won't give you the property. But then you can sue the council saying because of you.
We're going through all that.
Yeah.
So if you can use these judgments to get them
Which is what I will be looking into.
yeah, so have a look at them and just I'd recommend several reads so that you fully understand what it is. It's actually very, very simple. But you need to get it into your DNA in order that you can argue it with them. Because I think if we argue it with them properly, and I think the strategic partnership between the councils and the courts may be the thing that terrifies them. I think it might be. But there are all sorts of other aspects of the magistrates' courts acting as what is actually a tribunal when they're pretending it is a court. I mean, in our culture, the criminal masquerading, the debt collection masquerading as criminal is an endemic disease. We have it everywhere. I was going to give a talk about a DVLA scam, but I thought council tax was more important.
Yeah.
But basically, they're chasing me for a debt and trying to make it criminal in the guise of an unpaid fine, when in fact all it is the DVLA thinks I owe them some money. That's all it is. And the magistrates shouldn't be going anywhere near that. But they claim that I owe the courts money because they've imposed a fine on me. But it has no origin in any criminality at all. And this process is happening right across the board. Maybe the details are a little bit different in different cases, but that's fundamentally what it is. They're criminalising debt, and debt cannot be criminal. All it is somebody thinks you owe them some money. So yeah, if you can get them on, then please do get your house back, or at least get enough money to get another one.
I will be claiming punitive damages.
Yeah.
Bench, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, great.
Oh yeah, I'm throwing the book at you.
Exemplary and punitive.
By the way, I've just thought of another angle on my case. I'm sorry to, but basically, if the council insists on continuing to prosecute me for non-payment, then what they're going to have to consider is that I will do the same as the Reverend Nicholson did. Because as soon as they put the case back into the court, then it's not time barred anymore. So within 21 days, I can put in a Section 111 application to the magistrates to state a case to the High Court. And I can tell the council, look, do you want us to go through all of this again? It's going to cost you a fortune. It cost you a fortune to put me in the nick anyway. It's going to cost you a bomb to take this through the court, but I will do it. Because do you want to go through all that just because you won't accept a couple of High Court judgments?
Peter, they will, because they've got lots of money to sling that in. So
well,
they don't really care, but if you can get them on points of law, then it's busted, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so we'll see where it goes.
Good on you.
Yes,
I've heard about this.
There's a lady behind you. They had a hand up for a while, but we'll come back.
Yeah, I've been led to believe that they actually say that your council tax is due on your dwelling. And the actual legal definition of dwelling is a place where business is held,
Yeah.
not a residential property.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
it's
fine.
about-
So you need
They
to be
assume you're
looking at
running
that as
business
well.
in your home.
Yeah.
They assume you're running business in your car.
Yeah. So that's another thing.
Well, yeah, that-
Someone went to court in Southend a while ago, quite a while ago. I'm not sure if it was something. And they said to the judge, I've been asked to pay council tax on my dwelling. I don't have a dwelling because I don't run a business.
That's why they use.
And the judge actually asked the councillor if that was correct, that they were asking for council tax on the dwelling, and they kind of went, well, yes. And he said, well, sort it out.
All right. Well,
So I think I was told that, whether it's true, I don't know. So it's another angle worth looking at.
Yeah, I was talking to a lady from Swindon recently, and she got hers reduced to nil because she intervened in terms of they were using the money to fund terrorism. So she succeeded on that. So, but then if you try that with another council, you won't get anywhere. So it just depends.
But we don't, well,
I know this gentleman is before me, but if I can just tag on to what Corey just said. It is considered a residence or a business because you, as us, are the illegas, the corporation. That's where the corporation, the business is registered. So that's how they get us. Yeah.
Yeah.
but I do know that.
Well, it's
But that's why they do it. That's how they can do it.
that's right. But it does seem that sometimes some of us can wrinkle through a crack, which may be a slightly different one. So none of us knows how we're going to get success, but we just need to try. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could shed any light on the claim that the council tax is going towards to pay or compensate the disastrous investments that the council's made in regards to their employees' pension funds. There's been a couple of times that I've heard, I don't know whether you know, but apparently half the council tax payment is going towards council employees' pension investments. Because remember a while back they made some disastrous investments and they're trying to compensate. So how come council tax can go towards paying a pension?
Wow, good question, isn't it?
You know,
good question.
A couple of sources. I wondered if you could shed any light on it.
Yeah,
anything similar.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the details about that, but I do believe that a lot of people object to council tax because we don't want to pay for their pensions.
Yeah.
But if you read the annual financial reports, you will find that there are quite a few bits about pension schemes in the financial report. So you can go online, any council in the country, you can go online and read the financial report, and it will probably be 2015 that's on there now. But if you go through that, I mean, good luck. It's about 170 pages, but it's worth a skim through. But one page it's worth looking at first, which is I think it's called the financial statement. It's only 1 or 2 pages, and it's just a whole list of figures. But then when you can start fleshing it out by reading the rest of it. Or it's called the balance sheet or something like that. But yes, I do believe that pensions is an issue, and I wouldn't put it past them to try to bolster the funds of bad investments in the past. But I believe they're sitting on such enormous reserves that they wouldn't need to.
Probably
they wouldn't need to.
Probably in tax havens as well.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, I have somebody sent me some freedom of information requests about the annual financial statement scam. And apparently a lot of councils replied that they lend money to banks who then lend it out or whatever. So I believe they're using council tax money to make profits out of banks lending their money, our money. Yeah. So I think if you were to dig into it, you'd find. I tell you, if you can sit through 2 hours of a YouTube talk, which is kind of a bit like listening to paint dry, it's really worth it though. Walter J. Burien, who's from Arizona, and I think Walter J. Burien, Burien, and I think it was recorded in 2000. So he's been at it a long time, but he basically lays out the whole scam. Like I say, it's 2 hours, and he's a very dry speaker, but it's absolute dynamite. And then there's a younger researcher who's done a lot of terrific work in America, Craig somebody. I'll see if I can find his name later. But he's done some terrific stuff. And somebody asked him to look into the English situation, which he did for us. I think he's in California. So yeah, there's a lot in what you say. That investment, bad investment, hidden investment. Yeah, lots of very, very interesting stuff. So you're onto a big one there.
What's his name again, please?
Walter J. Burien.
Does he do that CFR or something?
CAFR,
That's the thing.
a comprehensive annual financial report. But in Britain they usually call it annual financial statement or something. But you'll find it easily enough. All councils publish them. They don't usually print them because it costs a bomb, but they always put them online. And And another part of that scam is that the auditors always sign it off because they're tame and because they want their fees. Yeah.
And yourself, or I'll throw it out to the floor. When there's a court case and a stitch-up, and the claimants are working in conjunction, the housing or the council, and they're working in conjunction with the court, and the judge grants full cost recovery to the party, what do you know what's going on there? Does anybody know what's going on there? Because I'd really like to know.
Well, I have fellow activists who have had big costs awarded to them deliberately to make them bankrupt, and that's one of the things that a lot of people do. A lot of organisations do it.
But the judge will grant full cost recovery. Somebody takes a court case out against an individual, and the whole thing's a big scam, right? And it's costing a lot of money to get an eviction or whatever it is they're doing. They get what they've asked for, even though it's completely illegal, and then the judge gives them full cost recovery.
Yes, that's right. Well,
but not from the other party. What is that, and where is that money coming from?
Well, it's usually awarded against the party that loses, isn't it?
Yeah. And if the party that loses...
But they cop for the costs. Well, and if it's more than 700 quid, then you could be bankrupted if you don't pay it.
It'd be about 20,000, but then if you're on legal aid, then...
Well, maybe the legal aid will pay them. I don't know.
Yeah, then the legal aid board will pay it. They'll pay back the costs of the company. The claimant will get whoever's wins will get it from the legal aid board. From the legal aid board. If they've been awarded full cost recovery, that means the winning party, the claimant probably, they're allowed to go the nuts for their costs from the other side. Because otherwise they won't get their costs. So it comes from the legal aid board will pay it. It either comes from the loser or the legal aid board. Yeah.
Well, the thing...
They're strictly or
yeah, I don't really know too much about the ins and outs of how the cost system works. But I do know one thing, is that in the court system there is a body called the taxing team.
Yeah.
And when a judge awards costs, and you put in your claim for costs, like what happened with Guy in one of his cases, is that the judge awarded acquitted defendants costs against him. And when Guy put his bill in, which wasn't huge, the taxing team said that he wasn't going to be able to get them paid because he wasn't legally represented. But actually, in fact, for part of his case, he was legally represented, and he had actually spent a couple of £1,000 on a solicitor. But the taxing team had decided that he wasn't due to have the money. And that taxing team is part of the court service. I believe they got an office in the court in Birmingham or something, this particular area. So there are bodies in some parts of the court service. Maybe that's only in the criminal, I don't know. But there are various bits that the taxing team does decide on certain levels of costs, but then county court judges appear to have the power to decide whether your costs are justified or not, and then award them to the party that wins.
What you're saying is, even if they are awarded, there's somebody there that's behind that will stop it being paid.
Don't know, but I know of various incidences where the claimant is deliberately trying to bankrupt the defendant. I know they are, and they've done it deliberately. I think it's quite common. Because then if they can get you on costs, then they can get your house and whatever else. Yeah.
just in relation to what you're asking, we find out that every court order, including a sum of money to make somebody bankrupt, has got to be registered on the registry trust. If nothing is there, obviously, because many cases are based on bogus papers and they never register these court orders, if nothing is there, you have the final proof that everything is a scam. So the registry trust online is cost only £10, and if they try to make you bankrupt, first place where to check is the registry trust. We just found out recently.
Yeah. It sounds like it's a big bit of research that you might have to do to get to the bottom of it, but it's a very interesting question though. I'm sure there's a lot buried in there.
Any more questions?
Well, great, thank you very much. It's been really nice.
Peter Croll, he's a very clever man, and he's going to talk about other things as well, like grand juries and such like. And just to touch on something that he said was taxes going to fund wars. We now believe that the jurisdiction that this country is in is under martial law from Europe. And if you go into court and claim that you're a non-competent, you stand there and they shouldn't be able to touch you. So it's something we're looking into, but that's for somebody else to talk about, not for me. It's just giving you a heads up of it. Right.
Debt Free TV, in association with GetOutOfDebtFree.org.